So good morning, everyone, and maybe good afternoon to folks who are coming from Europe or maybe East Coast and who are struggling with jet lag. I most definitely am. I didn't get enough sleep in the morning. So if I'm spaced out during the conversation, just feel free to actually don't pass any judgments that maybe I do not know the concept. I'm just like blabbering and stuff, right? So good morning, everyone. So why are we here, right? Based on the conversation from today's keynote itself, right? Gen AI is definitely here to stay, and I would assume like half of the people in the audience are developers in their past life or current life itself. So it's the code generation based on Gen AI is definitely here to stay, right? So how do you actually take it forward, right? So this talk is specifically focused on the adoption strategy, focus on risks involved in adoption, code generation, and what are some of the things you and your organization can do around the mitigation control itself, right? And I had, just as a disclaimer, I did this talk maybe 4 months ago at one of the ISACA Silicon Valley chapter, and there were like 315 people attended worldwide, and it was like phenomenal people who attended, which kind of actually gave me confidence that this is a topic that's important for most of the organization, right? Everybody is looking to bring in the solutions, but once it goes into like legal and compliance reviews, it kind of gets stalled there, right? So this is going to talk about how do you actually go through that journey. Some copyright stuff, but that's not important. So I'm going to start this presentation by talking about one quote from Jensen, and I'm pretty sure everybody in the room know who he is, right? So he made a quote, I think it was like February or March of this year, around like nobody really needs to learn to program anymore thanks to AI, right? I think I would personally take it with a grain of salt. I don't think so. The current maturity for AI is there yet that you can actually just blindly take your code generation, the code snippets directly into production, right? It's probably going to take a couple of years, maybe 5 years, maybe like 7 years. I would be surprised if it's going to be much sooner than that. You can just blindly say that, okay, you don't need anybody to actually code. But definitely, things are definitely changing, right? More and more organization, whether it's private side, public sector, they are kind of bringing in Gen AI into their organization, whether it's for code generation or using Microsoft Copilot or anything, right? So, leading from this into the next one, right? So this is this sort of the agenda that we're going to be following. A little bit of introduction, a focus on the changing landscape for the last 10, 15 years, especially with digital transformation itself. One of the advantages, use cases for code gen. I would typically do like a demo for these ones, but given like it's only 45 minutes, I would probably not focus on that one. And the demo is like pretty much focused on like bring in the tool, like some of the different use cases around like test case generation, code completion, explain code, fix code, all that, right? We're going to skip that one, but I do promise that I'm going to actually do a recording on YouTube for this particular thing. So I'm going to push it out there through my LinkedIn. We talked about the pricing models that you should be thinking about. Never go with the free tier, definitely go with the enterprise or a business model itself. Then we're going to definitely focusing on the code generation risk, right? Whether it's risk around like adoption or the licensing. Then we're going to talk about some of the mitigation control that you can actually adopt into your organization. And then towards the tail end, we're going to have some observations, some conclusion, and maybe there is some time for some Q&A. A little bio on myself itself, right? Again, like I consider myself to be a lifetime learner. I'm a big believer in co-sharing and co-learning together, right? I'm a firm believer that you cannot learn everything on your own, but you can learn or get to know people who actually know different pieces, right? And I think like AI itself is definitely falls into that category, right? I alone cannot know everything that's about AI, right? But with like maybe like 50, 60 people in this room, we can collectively know how do you actually start incorporating these things into your daily life, in your organization, at home, and what have you, right? Passionate about go-to-market strategy. Through my career, I've done like many things in technology and non-technology, including being a sales engineer back in the days. I love blogging. I've been on multiple podcasts, and recently I was also contributed to a book which maybe most of you already know about, 97 books for AppSec leaders. Extremely passionate about nonprofits and education area. And like I said, educating the masses of the connected nature and associated risk. I think the slide is getting cut somewhere. Okay, I'll move forward on this. And I lead two independent research groups focused on Gen AI and quantum computing. And I would probably also like talk about association with OWASP. So I'm part of the leadership for OWASP AI Exchange, and I'm also like one of the co-authors for LLM Top 10, specifically focused on supply chain. And I'm also like one of the co-leads for serverless Top 10, and one of my co-leads is here in the room. So we're going to have a conversation and a presentation tomorrow, I think in the morning. So I do welcome everybody to join us then also. Again, software has become like an integral part of all businesses, right? Thanks to digital transformation, which started maybe like 15, 20 years ago, right? And based on the current climate itself, right, it's important to actually deliver fast, deliver innovative solutions quicker, right? And with quality. But for this, you need like to have like effective development practices. You need to have like highly skilled like developers into the mix. So businesses are now expected to deliver innovative solutions faster. And this definitely has increased the demand for highly skilled developers itself, right? And finding skilled developers can be challenging from a multitude of reasons, whether it's because of compensation or where you're operating. Definitely globalization is helping in that particular space, but I think this particular challenge always remains, right? So these are like some of the leading indicators from organization, all the big fours, right? Whether it's PwC, KPMG, EY, McKinsey and stuff, right? And one of the things that we see on this particular slide, it's going to stay, it's going to actually impact the productivity for organization, and there are a lot of investments going into not just this big fours, but most of the organizations. So it's important to talk about the code generation in context of Gen AI itself. According to McKinsey, I think the product development and code automation would probably result in almost $1 trillion of impact over the next 6-7 years, right? And software engineering is also being influenced by these developments. With tools like code generation, you can actually generate code, you can create synthetic data for your models, and also like improve your test and documentation for your application, which has been plaguing the industry for many, many, many years. So all this is exciting, but are we really ready for prime time? Is the industry really ready to adopt this in big way, right? So those questions for most of the organization come to mind is like, how useful is the generated code, right? Can you blindly trust the generated code and put it directly into production without meaningful validation? Is the code being produced, is it valid? Is it performant? And is it safe? Another area of focus is like, is the generated code protected by license? If it's licensed like copyright, again, there are concerns on that. So you definitely need to actually bring in your legal and compliance people into the mix, right? To see, okay, what is protected, what is not protected. If you're ever hit with a lawsuit for copyright infringement, how do you go about that one? And another fundamental area is around, which is one of my favorite topic is, would it make developers better, or would them make them more reliant on these tools, right, to code? I don't know the answer. Maybe some of you probably know. But these are like some of the trends that I see, and also like what future holds, right? So we talked about Gen AI and coding market. It is expected to grow exponentially itself in the next 4 to 5 years, probably 100 million plus of investments going into this. AI-powered code assistants are gaining popularity, providing real-time code suggestions, documenting your code, improving your test coverage itself, right? And also the rise of low-code and no-code development platforms is driving the need for AI tools that can assist non-developers. I'll probably put some code together from Goldman Sachs. Most of the managing directors are expected now to actually know how to code in Python, right? It's no longer the case that you have to go to a team to actually put like a report together or put like an Excel which is taking input from multiple data sources, right? So it's definitely going to stay, right? And it's going to become more prominent. Anybody had question? Okay. Some of the advantages for code generation itself is definitely helps in rapid prototyping, improves the test coverage, documenting your code. It could be a legacy code that is sitting in your organization for the last 30 years. Nobody really want to actually backfill, whether it's documenting the code, what the code is really doing. And God forbid if you are still running COBOL and older stuff, right? Nobody really wants to touch. So you can definitely use these ones, these code generation tools to help you with that one. It definitely would accelerate the time to market, improve efficiency and productivity. Definitely it's going to result like cost saving. There are many of these advantages, right? And one important thing for most of the developers is like it can act as an assistant to your senior developers in your organization. Some of the use cases for this, which is kind of duplication of what we talked about, the advantages itself, right? Code completion, code snippet generation, bug detection and fixing, and you can actually go through this particular list itself, right? But I think you should always ask to yourself before you're bringing in a solution, right? Does it apply to my organization? Is it covering all the languages that are used in my organization? It's no longer about like C, C++ or Java, right? Is it tapping into Go, Golang, what have you, right? Ensure like it has support for infrastructure as code, different things. API integration is definitely there. Does it help you with their code reviews? And the list goes on, right? But this should be most of the use cases that you should be thinking about, right? And the next slide, and again, these are some of the codes from different people, different organizations, and we don't have to actually go in this. This is only a fraction of like feedback or testimonials for different people, right? But everything kind of directs towards a couple of things, right? One is GenAI is definitely going to be here for the longer run itself. It's definitely changing how the organization run their secure SDLC in their organization, and how can they actually deliver faster, right? And these are like some of the promising vendors that I personally have either validated or I know about. Everybody knows about GitHub, right? GitHub Copilot, Tab9, Google has Cody, AWS has Code Whisperers, Codium, Replit, Ghostwriter, and these are like a few of the solutions that I'm aware of, right? And this list is probably more with many companies who are probably operating in the stealth mode still. So we'll see like more and more such solutions coming to the market. But I think few of the tips that I can probably provide is like just don't go with the most popular vendor out there, right? You have to vet the product for your specific needs, how your organization runs the SDLC. And before doing or bringing a solution, you should clearly define your use cases. And again, like bring in these vendors are important, but you should define a success criteria. And where I actually put italics for you, because every organization is different, right? So you should define your own success criteria. Loosely, I think it kind of falls into this particular 7 or 8 bullet points around, like you should look at what is the latency for results? How quickly is the engine actually producing the code that you want? What is the quality of the suggested code? Does it offer explainability in very clear fashion, right? If it's suggesting, I want to ask a counter question, why did I actually write this? Why didn't it do it a different way, right? That I would have typically expected. Definitely look at features like chat. You can chat with the engine or the model itself. Number of tokens that it supports. Does it have support for IDs which are predominantly used in your organization, whether it's IntelliJ, Eclipse, what have you, right? Does it support all the languages that are there in your organization? There should definitely be focus on availability of metrics, like what is the quality of code, what are the number of bugs that it's bringing in to your organization, and maybe that could be a reason why you can actually gravitate from one solution to another. Does it have support for annotations? It's important for maintaining a lineage for your source code. And definitely there should be like a dashboard that people can actually review the results itself. over a course of time, right? Do you like the three common pricing model that I see in the industry? Of course, there is definitely a free tier, but free tier is more for like if you're just starting and trying to experiment. But once you're bringing in code that you want to put into your production, definitely go with either a pro, but better is like going to enterprise pricing model, right? Which has different options, whether it supports multiple models, not just one particular model, but does it support multiple models? Can you fine tune those models according to your specific code base, which has been running in your organization for the last 10, 20, 30 years? If you have Bloomberg, for example, which has source code which is running for the last 30 years, you want the model to be fine tuned according to the source code that has been there. Does it have it would have support for advanced admin tools for you defining user policies, track the usage, how people are using this one over a period of time, single sign-on, and definitely has protections around IP indemnification, right? If you're ever hit with a lawsuit because you're using a source code that was produced by Samsung, most of these vendors would typically bite the bullet on that one and protect you, right? Some of the considerations before you bring in solutions, definitely look at the cost of acquisition. Think total cost of ownership, right? It's not just the ticket price, right? How many people are supporting this particular solution? Are you actually getting the value from this one, right? And what are the legal implications around the code ownership? That's going to be important. We talked about support for various AI models. The fourth bullet point is around the annotation, is one of my favorites. To prove to the auditors, to the regulators, right, how you brought in a piece of code, or how you brought like a code snippet which God forbid if it actually results into some outage, you need to be actually prove like, okay, this is something that we got from X, Y, and Z engine at this point in time, and this was the developer, right? Does it fit into your cultural changes, culture for your organization? Definitely look at the vendor's branding itself, the product reviews that are coming from your peers, some of your friends itself. It's very important to actually be in tune with that one, especially because it's a growing market itself, and you need to be aware what's happening. If there is a breach or something, you want to be in tune with that. Look at the profile for the founders itself, who are backing them up, who are the angel investors, which speaks volume about maturity for that organization. Be in tune with your vendor's product roadmap, what's coming down the pipe. We talked about the customer feedback. Definitely be engaged or be aware of like what does the vendor's involvement at the industry and regulatory level, how they are shaping up the roadmap for the industry itself, and how are the underlying models were trained, right? Does it have filters around like being trained only on the permissive, or does it also have options for like copyleft license, right? You should be able to actually filter on that one. And definitely as an organization, you also ask like, does it impact your younger developers, the fresh graduates that are coming into your organization? So we talked a lot about like the adoption strategies itself, but I think it's important to talk about two different things, right? One aspect is around the risks, and the second aspect, which I'm going to cover at a later point, is like what are some of the mitigation strategies that you can actually bring into your organization. So I'm going to just take a pause here. How many people in the audience itself have already have any of a code generation tool actively being used, or you're experimenting? And how many of these ones you actually have been running for more than 6 months? So it's definitely actually being there, right? So again, like this is maybe like 11 different bullet points. So when you started your journey, and I'm probably going to pick on like a couple of folks to make it more interactive. So I think the gentleman in black, you raise your hand, right? I just want to have it more of an interactive session, right? So when you started your journey, what were some of the risks that you observed, or you figure out, okay, these are like some of the risks and I need to do something about it in my organization? And you can actually look at this particular list as well.
Okay, so I usually use it as examples of code. So our policy is that we do not not just paste it into our code. So I use it as a guide. Okay, this is the kind of code that I want to write. So if I'm looking for an example of a snippet of a code, I look at it, okay, and then I can modify it accordingly. So copy pasting directly from GenAI is actively discouraged, mostly because of IP reasons.
That's a fair point. Yeah. I mean, you're my best buddy on this audience because I take like license very, very seriously, right? Any?
Sure. Security vulnerabilities that are written by the code generation. I've seen that. Injection vulnerabilities, for example, I've seen some being produced. It's been a while. Another concern is, of course, sending internal code out there to be edited. So if you're using something like these tools that you mentioned, I use Aider, which is an open source solution, and it's sending your source code out there to get it modified and to suggest diffs, right? So some of this source code is absolutely fine to send over. It's open source software maybe. Some of this source code is not. So there's the confidentiality concern. And I was going to ask you, in fact, if you have in your slides or in your presentation anything about low-kill LLMs, right? Because that solves some things, brings new problems, and hardware is expensive. I think those two are most concerning for me.
I know we had like this side of the room actually contribute, but anybody from this side? I think you raise your hand.
So I normally work with a lot of different languages. So I think one thing I've used it for is to autocomplete, and it's all within the organization, so I haven't really dealt with the issue of sending the code out. So it's safe that way, but I think basically using it as as someone who kind of looks at to make sure the format is correct and it compiles and stuff like that. But I've also seen it make mistakes.
Yeah. And I think towards the conclusion, I'm going to share some of the observation, which this is exactly one of those things, right? Did anybody in the room have issues saying, okay, I have like a code which is maybe 100 lines or maybe 1,000 lines, for example, and I'm not getting the response from my code generation tool itself, right? Because based on the number of tokens, it would actually stall and it's not going to work. Anybody had that observation? Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just have to select what you need to. So again, my experience has been with the open source tool Aider, and if you have that problem, you remove some of the code that is being sent to, in my case I was using OpenAI and Claude, I think. And then you have to work around it, right? You reduce the number of tokens that are required there for the generation especially, and so on.
And based on some of the successes that you probably have, what are like some of the perceived benefits have you observed till date?
Efficiency.
Speed.
My productivity has definitely gone up. I don't have to read through Stack Overflow or documentation. Just query, and it gives me the answer. So I think it contributes to my flow, but it definitely aids me in my coding, but I would say it augments my coding skill. It doesn't actually say, okay, I'll do my job. I don't think it's there yet.
And was it an easy sell within your organization to developers?
It wasn't an easy sell to me, but once I got to it, it worked.
Okay.
So I only have the sample size of one.
So I think I'm going to go to some of my top favorite risk around this one. Inherent quality issues within the code. And it's not just quality, right? The safety and security is important. Source code copyright infringement is a big deal. And what if you can actually reverse engineer the model that's there, right? What about package hallucinations? And is that package hallucination any concern with anybody in the room itself? I'm pretty sure I would see like more than 10 hands. Oh, pretty good. poorly optimized code. I think you kind of reflected on that one a little bit. And is this the second to last bullet point, developers becoming over-reliant on AI tools, is it longer run risk? Is that a concern that anybody shares except myself?
But you can, you can kind of compensate with AI again. Because it can explain stuff to you, for example. The documentation is pretty good for Python code, for example, which is generated by OpenAI's models. So it's better than getting someone as a freelancer who doesn't document their code.
So let me do like a live poll here, right? So again, like I would say like half the people are already using it. How many people are using it in context of Java? Just 3? I thought it's going to be almost the full. Python? Any of the new languages, Golang and stuff? And again, like Golang is not something that I've used efficiently. Do you think like the feedback is what you expect, or does it require like multiple retries?
It's pretty good in my opinion. I think the biggest problems that I found is when I asked it to do things that are not documented online. So new concepts rather than the language itself, in my opinion.
Okay, and last but not least is definitely improving or increasing the I think there are two aspects on this one, right? It's definitely addressing the technical debt, but if it's not handled properly, it can actually increase your technical debt, right? Some inherent bugs that are going undetected if you're not testing it properly, right? I talked about one of my favorite risks is around licensing itself. Could the generated code be protected through copyright or by obtaining patent itself? Is the generated code be considered derivative of a work of other copyrighted code itself, whether it's covered under like shift left itself, and whether it's fair to use to train the model using such copyrighted code, right? And these are like some of the mitigation controls that you should actually definitely bring in within your organization. Definitely have like a code generation policy within your organization. You kind of alluded to this recently. Definitely choose a tool which is reputable. Definitely review and test the generated code, probably always, right? It definitely brings in this to the forefront, is expand your integration testing and functional testing more than ever. Definitely make sure your critical application which are using Gen AI code, Gen itself goes through like the code reviews, right? Bring in like senior developers into that one. Definitely start with a small pilot group. Focus on less risky application. Don't go with like your business critical application which are client facing. When you're giving out the prompts, like in ChatGPT itself, right? Your results depend on how effectively your prompts are, right? Your prompt should be concise, clear. It should have like a necessary context itself, right? To ensure you get the desired results faster. You can go the route of like having a dedicated firewall, the pilot set of users, so that it's very, very siloed itself. Definitely focus on annotating your source code to maintain the lineage. Is that something that resonates with anybody in the room for doing the annotation for your source code? Can somebody think why it should be important if you're not doing it? Let's say there is a lawsuit that comes, you got some source code from tab 9 and stuff, right? And God forbid it was trained on some source code from Samsung, right? And let's say Samsung comes to you and say, okay, I'm going to actually file a lawsuit again because you're using a code that was probably created at Samsung, right? How would you actually prove to the auditors or the lawyers or somebody in your legal team that, okay, this particular thing came from ChatGPT or Copilot or some engine out there and not directly to Samsung, right? So it will provide you that lineage which you can say, okay, This particular source code was created in December 1st, 2023, and this was the developer, and this was the engine that you were kind of using it, right? So it becomes important at that point of time, right? There haven't been any lawsuit yet in the market itself. I mean, like there are talks that it's a major issue, but I think that's an important consideration that you should have. Go with the enterprise plan, which we talked about, the pricing tier itself to get IP protection mainly, and monitor the tool adoption issues and focus on bad and good press also, right? What you're hearing from your peers. Actually, let me take a pause here, right? Anything else that you have done in your market, in your organization for providing controls? Anybody from this side want to chime in? David, how about you? Actually, sorry, go ahead.
The intellectual property protection, both 111 here, is what we did at my company. We bought an enterprise license, and that includes indemnification, that if there's an intellectual property lawsuit, we're indemnified, and the vendor is responsible for that defense.
Fair point. And have you actually considered, again, like I'm not sure what solution you use. They definitely provide IP indemnification itself. They're going to cover you from a lawsuit. But let's say there's a lawsuit happens and maybe like 15 different companies are under the lawsuit, right? Like let's say a small vendor like Tab9 and stuff is fronting that bill, right? And let's say they only have like $10 million, maybe $50 million in their bank, right? They're going to be bankrupt by the time all these 15 lawsuits are like covered, right? So in that particular case, there is like a, I'm not sure what is the legal term would be, like what is left is going to come to your organization. So I think sometimes it's important to go to a bigger vendor out there, right? And I'm not saying that you should not focus on the smaller player, but that's a risk that is definitely there, right?
Oh, legal was involved.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's about my pay grade. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this. I saw like somebody else had a hand up.
DLP, so passing connections to it's a third party, making sure that everything goes through DLP. So if you have anything sensitive in your code, that at least it has some hope of being scrubbed.
So how did you address that one?
Well, using existing DLPs.
Okay. I thought you were raising your hand. No. Okay, sorry. Anybody from this side of the room?
I'm wondering about local LLMs, if it's something that you have seen, or, you know, what are people actually implementing, you know, using open source, like, you know, Meta, Llama, and so on and so forth, which can be hosted and can be actually controlled by the organization.
Yeah, again, maybe we can have like a side conversation on this one. This is not something that I've explored in my experience to have like a local hosted solution itself. And I think like there are some organizations that are already doing it, but I don't belong to those organizations yet. So.
This is maybe not directly to mitigation controls. I don't have a lot of experience in this area, but the one thing I'm thinking about too is, you know, using these tools to build security features in your code, right? So maybe a naive developer wouldn't think about just the standards like input validation, strong authentication, whatever it is. I don't know to what extent do these tools warn you about these possibilities, or will they help you build them, or will they just let you go? Like, input validation, we don't need that. Let's not worry about it. This, that, the other thing.
Like based on my observation, I think like some of the basic stuff, it already does very effective. Like because it's trained on like code that has been there sitting there for like last 20, 30 years itself, right? So it definitely addresses. And personally, the basic stuff, whether it's SQL injection, cross-site scripting, input validation, I think those are always addressed but there are like some niche or like a very, very specific areas that I do feel like it can have done. And sometimes I feel like you don't get the desired result in the first try, right? It would probably take like multiple iteration before you get the desired result itself. So to answer your question, the basic stuff is already assumed it's going to be there. But again, just don't take it blindly, right? Ensure like you have your SaaS solution, DaaS solutions, your SCA, all these things that's like addressing all those things and catching those before you start blindly assuming that it's going to be pristine, it's going to be absolutely clean of all safety issues or quality issues.
Cool. And on top of that, there's a bit of a feedback control that you can have. So if you just ask for a piece of code, it might or might not include that security protection mechanism that you know you need. But if you tell it that you know you need this, then it will include it. It might not be 100% correct, by the way.
Yeah.
But then you can tell, hey, that's not correct. I wanted this, this, and this, and it will do it. It's like working with a junior developer who knows too much.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Ramesh, actually a question for you, maybe the audience. One thing that is interesting regarding code generation now is like maybe more for junior developers, will they blame at the end the auto-generation of the code if there's some issue with their code, like saying like it's my fault, like I just like used the tool that was accepted by the company, like I'm using ChatGPT, and so, or like Copilot, and so like that's not really my code. In terms of blame or ownership of the code, will at the end developers will be responsible of the commit, or like and can see that with bots that already committing code, will at the end we can like shift the blame to like some agent and will be liable for the code if there's some issue and like some money loss at the end.
I would say the initial point of having an enterprise-wide code generation policy kind of brings it a little closer itself, right? If I'm writing a code or if I'm getting it from Stack Overflow or Copilot, essentially it should be my responsibility as a developer, as a tester itself, that I validated that it works. So you cannot put the blame on the other side, right? That would be my perception. Again, like every organization going to be very different. Some organizations say, okay, speed is important, so I'm going to start consuming the source code at like a lightning speed, right? So I think it depends on.
I think it may be true, like if you're only like looking at code generation, like the pure one that right now at Copilot, and at the end you're the one who's pressing the button when you're committing the code. But you're thinking like AI agents, for example, that are more autonomous and that will actually do something by themselves. Will be interesting to see at the end who will actually take the blame. There's some issue there.
Anybody has inputs on this specific question?
Well, the way I personally see it is, if you're paid as a developer, okay, you should take responsibility. AI agents and not. You have a point with AI agents. Things become, you have the manager and you have the manager agent and so on, and so things become much faster and more out of control as well. It's hard to debug. But ultimately, responsibility should lie with who is supposed to be responsible on their, on their job description.
Okay.
Point to add is, if the AI agent is writing the code, someone else likely needs to review it before it gets coded. So the responsibility then is again on the person.
Sure. But I can tell you something today, like people are reviewing code from other team members who is actually blaming, they want to blame when there's an issue. The ones who write the code in the first place, not the reviewer, like basically the reviewer.
I know you had your hand up, right?
Yeah, just an observation, like, while like we do a decent job with writing a code with the security implementation and all, but we have some observation even when you write an infrastructure as a code, so it may miss few things there, like for example, how you want to configure that, so it's like a big miss there.
Yeah, I specifically pointed out ISC because ISC is like a growing area for most of these engines. It's like not fully supported, and you'll see like countless issues with that one, right? So I don't think so. The level of maturity for ISC is there for all the platform, right? And I think like it's a catch-up game everybody is kind of playing, right?
Yeah, we found
Did you catch it before going into production or?
Well, they have to go to the security review.
Okay.
That was kind of
These are like some of my own observation itself. The code generation, it's not the code generation, the test coverage and documentation will definitely improve, undoubtedly. For a very complex scenario itself, it would require a lot of tries to get like the desired code, right? Like what you were talking about. The code may not be the most performant code. This is something that you need to go through your regular SDLC controls itself, right? Regression testing, functional testing, security scanning, all that is going to be important for that. And the larger the code base is, the longer it's going to take. And after a certain length, I think somebody was talking about, they actually found this issue, right? I think you were talking about, after a certain length, the model will stop responding on that one for that specific query, right? So you might have to break into the chunks or maybe use like a chat feature which actually supports that one.
Just one comment regarding that, the not most performant code. I think it really depends on what you ask the AI. If you're not asking for performant code, you may not get the most performant one. And I think that in many cases, it's actually most performant than a lot of developers that are not the best. So,
Actually, good point.
And not only that, on top of that, you can take an existing code, maybe code AI generated, and tell it, hey, make it more performant. And you see improvements being done based on what it's being trained on.
Yeah. I know you had some thought.
Oh, yeah, well, the only thing that I have to say is that most of these LLMs are really targeted towards emulating human activities. For this audience, it's coding. So, and my perception is that, you know, we have all of these processes to mitigate human fallibility in terms of programming. So a way to mitigate a lot of these risks would be to have the same kind of mitigation, like we have code reviews. If we have code reviews for human code, they're code written by humans, then maybe we should have reviews for Gen AI. So we had reviewing agents or something like that. And then the same kind of processes that we have testers. So we might want to think about that aspect as well, not just code generation, but test generation and integration testing and whatnot. So that's just.
So I know I'm getting like a ping that it's only 2 minutes left. So in conclusion, right, AI-based software development tools will definitely help the developers to write and review code faster and more efficiently. We should be aware of the risk associated with using these particular tools in the organization. By taking steps to mitigate these risks, you can help to ensure your software is safe and secure. And again, like I'll go back to the initial slide, which is talking about that people don't need to learn how to program together. I don't think so it's there, but how many people feel like in the next 2 years we'll be there and we'll kind of agree with Jensen? 5 years, if not 2 years? I see like 10 years perhaps? Yeah, so that's it guys. Thank you. Thanks for attending. Thank you. Thank you very much.